The next thing we're gonna work on is part 2 of the kitchen. So that was, like I had mentioned before, we're splitting it in half. So this is the second part of that. And in this shot, we're just capturing that whole right side island. And again, we're getting the wall ovens. We're getting these cool see-through upper cabinets with those really cool wrought iron poles on them. It looks like there's one missing on the bottom. So we're gonna probably try to fix that in post. Again, we're not even in the kitchen. We're not anywhere near the kitchen. We're sort of almost by the dining area, and we're shooting across the corner of the sofa, again, trying to anchor all these spaces together, give them context, and give it more of a design type feel, not that super wide angle thing. I'm gonna have to do some propping and staging. Gotta straighten out these couch cushions here. I'm gonna have to adjust the stools. It looks like they're sort of all bunched up more to the right side of that island, so I'm gonna slide them back this way. Once we get that stuff done, I'm gonna come back to the camera, see if it needs any kind of adjustment in terms of composition, camera height. I'm gonna look for tangents and that kind of thing. But the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pop over and sort these cushions out. This guy's actually kind of in the bottom of the frame and I don't love it, so I'm actually gonna smush it right over. I don't even wanna show that. So I'm just gonna smush it down and then I'm just gonna go through and tighten all these guys up. Make them nice and neat and tidy. And I'm just gonna scooch these stools down to the left. Sometimes the spacing can look a little bit weird to the camera because of the perspective. So the spacing won't always be even in between the stools. Sometimes there'll be a gap bigger on the one end or the other. And you won't be able to tell until you get back to camera, but this should look pretty good. And I'm gonna scooch this stool in as well. I'm gonna creep it in on this corner like that. We're gonna come back to the camera. We're gonna click over to autofocus and halfway push the shutter down. We hear the beep, we know we've got focus. We're gonna switch back to manual. And let's go down the meter around to where it says is a good exposure. That's just my starting point. You could reference the back of the camera if you want. If it looks good to you, start there. I just always start at 0 and I go either way from there. So let's take a shot. So I think that actually looks really good. It's quite bright outside in this area there by the back door. There's the driveway out there and the sun's all beaming down and hitting that. It's not too bad. We still have detail in the window outline. We don't want to, again, kill ourselves trying to get a perfect exposure down there. If it was starting to blow out and it was really noticeable, we might try to do a little extra work and maybe light down there. I'm going to brighten the exposure a little bit by dragging the shutter, and then we're going to start to add some speed lights to this. So I'm going to come up. I'm gonna go 2/3 over what the camera thinks is a good exposure and take another shot. I feel like that's a good starting point, but we are starting to lose the grates inside the window, so I'm gonna have to go down a little bit more. So I'm gonna actually come down right to where it says is 0. We're gonna take another shot. And keep in mind, again, I'm reviewing this on the laptop. And that's not something that I would ever do when I'm shooting real estate in the field. It would always be just reviewing it on the back of the camera, but I do have the luxury right now. Again, this feels a little bit dark, but we're gonna bring all that up. We're gonna use our speed light with the gel and the umbrella. And I'm just gonna place it in this area here and see what happens. So always adding just one light at a time and building up the exposure from there. So I'm gonna take a shot. I'm gonna add another light as well. So one of these little guys with a flash feet is gonna go over here, and I'm just gonna hit the wall over by the powder room. I know because this house is the house of mirrors that it's gonna show up in that art on the wall. I'm gonna have to deal with that later, but I do need a little more fill on this side. We have a hard shadow right over here on the island. We're gonna eliminate that with the top-down lighting, but I think that I just need to get a little bit more overall fill. So I'm gonna pop that one off. I also feel like I might take this guy and put him over here, just up on this mantle. That gave us a little bit more light in the living room area, a little bit more light on the sofa. I'm actually gonna add one more light as well. I want that area to be just a little bit brighter over here in the living room and get some nice light on these couch cushions here. And it's not uncommon to stack lights sometimes. There's been times where I put 4 or 5 lights in a corner if I need to. That's where the big mono lights come in handy, but again, for real estate, we want to try to keep it as quick as possible, and putting those on a stand is going to slow you down ultimately. So don't be afraid if you have to stack, 2 or 3 lights in the corner. It's totally not a big deal. Okay, so I love this down here. It looks like it's all being lit by daylight. It feels like it's all coming through those French doors there. So that feels really nice to me. I'm gonna back off the light power for the umbrella. So that's more of a fill duty, and I'm gonna grab my light on a stick and we're gonna bounce it off the ceiling again to create that top-down light that looks really nice for the islands. One thing I will mention is that we're gonna have to deal with that reflection in this artwork here at some point. So we might have a shot for that in our base exposure, but we're gonna definitely take one so that we know that we have that to drop in post. So let's turn this light down just a little bit. I'm gonna go down to a 1/4 power. And with our light on the stick, I'm gonna stand just out of frame and we're gonna pop it off the ceiling here. Started to fill everything in. I feel like it's a little bright and I feel like it should be more behind the island. So I'm actually gonna walk back here and pop it over on this side of the island. Still a little bit bright. I'd like a little bit more shape on the waterfall here where this comes down. So I might try to get the light just a little more in here so that it creates some shadow on this side. So standing just out of frame again, I'm gonna try to maybe bounce it up more over here. Again, this is a trial and error type thing. You never know what you're gonna get. You sort of have a good idea going into it and then you bounce the light, have a look, and then come back to it. I think I'm gonna turn off the light that we have sitting on the countertop. That's the one that was reflecting in the artwork, so I might be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. And again, I'm gonna bounce off the ceiling. I think for real estate, that's pretty dramatic. Let me try one more thing. I'm gonna come up a little bit on the power, and I'm gonna bounce the light more over top of this island over here. Try to brighten up that whole end of the kitchen. And you know what? I'm gonna bounce one from the other side as well. I'm gonna be in the frame on this one. I have everything I need up to this point, but I wanna make sure that I have an extra frame or 2 in case I need it. I'm just gonna be over here. And it gave me some pretty cool light on these glass cabinets here. I know obviously the one at the top here has a big hot spot in it, so I won't be using that, but I don't feel like I'm super happy 100% with the light yet. So I'm just gonna come over here and try this. I'm holding the light a little bit closer to the ceiling on this one. And again, that's giving me a smaller hot spot, which is gonna give me a more hard light, and maybe I'll get some harder shadows that really give us good shape below. It's a little bit hot in this corner down here, and this shadow is super hard. Again, we probably have all the pieces that we need to combine these together, but I wanted to always try to keep it to 2 or 3 frames maximum. So just let me try one more flash pop, and then I think we can call it a day on this shot. I feel pretty good. One thing I'm gonna do really quick here is I'm just gonna drag the shutter a tiny bit and do the exact same thing. The reason for that is I just wanna bring up the values a little bit more, and I feel like it's getting a little flashy. The color temperature is a little bit cool, and this might just warm it up a touch just so there's better color throughout. When we get into Lightroom, we can go through the selections and look and see sort of which pieces work best, and then we'll put these all together. And I think it's time to move on to the next shot.